Billionaire husband never touched me, until a kiss at midnight changed everything. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready. Let's start. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Voss and Sons, casting long shadows across the rows of gleaming instruments that had once been Kendra's sanctuary. Now they felt more like silent witnesses to her failing dreams. She ran her fingers along the neck of a vintage Gibson guitar, its mahogany surface worn smooth by countless hands, and wondered how much longer she could keep the doors open. "Another notice," whispered her best friend Luna, sliding the certified letter across the counter with the gentleness of someone delivering bad news to a terminal patient. Luna Martinez had been Kendra's anchor since childhood, her loyalty unwavering even as Kendra's world crumbled piece by piece. Kendra's dark eyes scanned the document, though she already knew its contents by heart. Final notice, 30 days, foreclosure proceedings. The words blurred together like a cruel song she'd been forced to memorize. She folded the paper carefully, as if treating it with respect might somehow change its meaning. "How much do you need?" Luna asked, though they both knew the answer was impossible. 200,000, Kendra said, her voice barely above a whisper, plus interest, plus penalties. She laughed, but it came out hollow, echoing in the empty shop. Might as well be 2 million. The afternoon brought its usual trickle of customers, a teenager testing drumsticks, an elderly man inquiring about piano lessons, a young mother whose daughter had begged for a violin. Kendra watched them all with the bittersweet knowledge that these interactions were numbered. Each sale felt like selling pieces of her parents' souls. Her mother, Carmen Voss, had died 3 years ago, leaving behind not just grief, but a mountain of medical bills that had slowly devoured everything. Her father, Benjamin, had passed when Kendra was 12, but his dream of creating a place where music could flourish had lived on in every corner of this shop. Now, at 28, Kendra was about to let it all slip away. The bell above the door chimed, and Kendra looked up to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit surveying the shop with calculating eyes. He was tall, probably 6'2", with sharp features and prematurely silver hair that suggested he was older than his face indicated. Everything about him screamed money and power, from his Italian leather shoes to the way he held himself like someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "Can I help you?" Kendra asked, straightening her shoulders and forcing her brightest customer service smile. The man approached the counter with measured steps, his pale blue eyes never leaving hers. "I'm looking for Kendra Voss." "You found her." She studied his face, searching for any sign of recognition. "Do we know each other?" "Elliot Bailey." He extended his hand and she shook it, noting the firm grip and the slight callus on his index finger, unexpected for someone who clearly lived in boardrooms rather than music rooms. "I believe we have something to discuss. If you're here about the payments—" "I'm not a creditor, Ms. Voss." He glanced around the shop again, this time with what might have been appreciation. "I'm here with a proposition." Kendra's heart sank. She'd heard that tone before, from developers who wanted to buy the building, from chain stores that wanted to gut the character out of her family's legacy. "Let me guess. You want to turn this place into another coffee shop or boutique fitness studio?" "Actually, I want to save it." The words hung in the air like a melody she'd never heard before. Kendra blinked, certain she'd misunderstood. "I'm sorry, what?" Elliot Bailey pulled out a leather portfolio and placed it on the counter between them. "I know about your financial situation, Ms. Voss. I know this shop has been in your family for 30 years. I know your parents would have wanted you to keep it alive. How do you— I make it my business to know things." His tone was matter-of-fact, neither apologetic nor boastful. "I also know that you're out of options. The bank will foreclose in 30 days. Your credit is exhausted. Your friends don't have the resources to help, no matter how much they want to." Kendra's cheeks burned. Having her desperation laid out so clinically felt like being dissected in public. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Bailey?" "A partnership." He opened the portfolio, revealing documents that looked official and expensive. "I'll pay off your debts, renovate this place, and provide you with enough capital to expand. In return, you'll help me with something I need. Which is? Elliot Bailey's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the first crack in his polished facade. I need a wife. Kendra laughed, the sound sharp and disbelieving. Excuse me? Not a real wife. A business arrangement. 3 years. We live together, appear together at necessary social functions, and maintain the facade of a happy marriage. At the end of 3 years, we divorce amicably, and you keep the shop free and clear. The shop fell silent, except for the soft ticking of the antique clock on the wall, a wedding gift her parents had received 40 years ago. Kendra stared at this stranger, who had just offered to save her life in exchange for her cooperation in what sounded like an elaborate deception. Why me? She asked finally. Because you're perfect for what I need. You're intelligent, articulate, and you have the kind of natural grace that looks good in photographs. More importantly, you're desperate enough to say yes and honest enough to honor the terms. The brutal honesty of his assessment should have offended her, but instead, it felt almost refreshing. At least he wasn't pretending this was anything other than a business transaction. What aren't you telling me? Kendra asked, crossing her arms. Men like you don't need to buy wives. What's the real reason? Elliot Bailey's eyes flickered with something that might have been respect. I'm closing a deal that will make both of our companies very wealthy. The potential partners value family stability. They won't do business with a bachelor who appears to have no personal connections or commitments. So you need me to be your prop. I need you to be my partner in maintaining a necessary illusion. Kendra walked to the window, looking out at the street where she'd grown up, where her parents had built their dream and where she was about to lose it all. 3 years of her life in exchange for saving everything that mattered to her. 3 years of pretending to be married to a man who saw her as a business solution rather than a person. I need time to think, she said. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, I'll need to find another solution. As Elliot Bailey walked toward the door, Kendra called out, Why does it have to be marriage? Why not just hire an actress for events? He paused, his hand on the door handle. Because what I need requires authenticity. These aren't people who can be easily fooled. They'll investigate us, scrutinize us, test us. We need to be able to pass as a real couple, which means we need to know each other, live together, and present a believable relationship. And after 3 years, we'll have what we both want. You'll have your shop, and I'll have my deal. We'll both be free to pursue our real lives. The door chimed as he left, and Kendra stood alone among the instruments that had shaped her childhood, facing an impossible choice that would determine the rest of her life. That evening, Kendra sat in her cramped apartment above the shop, surrounded by the ghosts of her parents' dreams. The walls were lined with photographs. Her father teaching her to play guitar when she was 7, her mother behind the counter helping a young boy choose his first trumpet. Family moments frozen in time when their biggest worry was whether to expand into sheet music or not. She'd called Luna 3 times, each conversation ending the same way, with her best friend's voice tight with concern and the unspoken truth that there were no other options. Luna had offered to mortgage her own small apartment, but they both knew it wouldn't be enough to make a dent in the debt. It's insane, Luna had said during their final call. You don't know anything about this guy. He could be a serial killer, a con artist, or worse, a politician. Now, sitting with Elliot Bailey's business card in her hand, Kendra wondered if desperation had finally made her lose her mind. The card was simple, elegant, just his name and a phone number embossed in silver lettering. No company name, no title, nothing to suggest the kind of wealth that could casually offer to solve her problems. She'd spent hours researching him online. Elliot Bailey, 34, CEO of Bailey Technologies, a company that specialized in advanced sound systems for concert venues and recording studios. His net worth was estimated in the hundreds of millions, though he kept a remarkably low profile for someone so wealthy. No scandals, no tabloid relationships, no social media presence to speak of. He was, by all accounts, Exactly what he appeared to be, a successful private businessman who apparently needed a wife like other people needed a new car. The knock on her door came at exactly 9 o'clock, as if he'd been watching the building and timing his arrival. When she opened it, Elliot stood in the hallway, looking somehow both formal and approachable in dark jeans and a navy sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Ms. Voss," he nodded politely. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I thought we should discuss the details in person." "Come in." She stepped aside, suddenly conscious of her modest apartment, the second-hand furniture, the stack of unpaid bills on her coffee table, the general air of someone barely keeping their head above water. "Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be nice, thank you." As she prepared 2 cups in her tiny kitchen, she watched him examine her living space with the same calculating attention he'd given the shop. His eyes lingered on the framed photos, the small upright piano wedged into the corner, the sheet music scattered across her dining table. "You compose," he observed, picking up a handwritten piece titled Carmen's Lullaby. "A little. It's something I wrote for my mother before she—" Kendra trailed off, not wanting to share that particular wound with a stranger. Elliot set the music down carefully. "It's beautiful. The harmony in the bridge is particularly complex." She blinked, surprised. "You read music? I studied piano for 12 years. My father insisted." Something flickered across his face, not quite pain, but a shadow of old discomfort. He believed cultural accomplishments were necessary for business success. "And now I run a company that makes other people's music sound better." He accepted the coffee cup with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ironic, isn't it?" They sat across from each other at her small table, the contract between them like a third presence in the room. Elliot had brought additional documents, detailed terms, financial projections, even a prenuptial agreement that read more like a business merger than a marriage contract. 3 years, Kendra said, scanning the pages. No physical intimacy. Separate bedrooms, public appearances as needed, social events, business dinners, family gatherings. You'd have your own credit card, your own car, and complete autonomy over the shop's operations. I'm not looking to control your life, Ms. Voss. I'm simply asking you to share the appearance of it. What about dating? Relationships? What if I meet someone? Elliot's jaw tightened slightly. Discretion would be required. No public relationships, no social media posts, nothing that could compromise the arrangement. After 3 years, you'd be free to pursue whatever relationships you choose. And you? The same terms apply to me. Kendra studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or hidden agenda. This seems like an elaborate solution to a simple problem. Why not just hire a professional actress? Someone who specializes in this kind of thing. Because authenticity can't be purchased, Ms. Voss. It has to be lived. Elliot leaned forward slightly, his pale eyes intense. The people I'm dealing with will investigate everything about us. They'll want to know how we met, why we fell in love, what our plans are for the future. They'll test us in ways we can't anticipate. So we need to know each other. We need to be able to convince people who are paid to spot lies that we're genuinely in love. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Kendra felt a strange flutter in her chest. Not attraction exactly, but a recognition of the enormity of what he was proposing. They would have to become intimate strangers, sharing a life without sharing their hearts. I have conditions, she said finally. Elliot nodded. I'm listening. The shop remains entirely under my control. You don't get to make decisions about inventory, staff, or operations. It's my business, not yours. Agreed. I want to keep Luna as my manager. She's been with me since the beginning, and I won't abandon her for this arrangement. That's fine. And I want to know the truth about why you're doing this. Not the sanitized version you gave me yesterday, the real reason. For the first time since she'd met him, Elliot Bailey looked genuinely uncomfortable. He set down his coffee cup and stared at it for a long moment as if gathering courage. My father built Bailey Technologies from nothing, he said finally. When he died 2 years ago, He left me a company worth 9 figures and the expectation that I'd expand it into something even bigger. This merger isn't just about money. It's about proving I'm worthy of his legacy. And you can't do that alone. Apparently not. The admission seemed to cost him something. The companies I'm dealing with are traditional, family-oriented. They see a 34-year-old bachelor as unstable, unreliable. They want to know that I have someone who grounds me, who gives me something to fight for besides profit margins. So you need me to be your anchor. I need you to help me become the kind of man they believe can be trusted with their business. Kendra reached for the pen, then stopped. What if we can't pull it off? What if we're terrible at pretending to be in love? Then we'll both lose everything we're trying to save. She signed her name at the bottom of the contract, the ink sealing a bargain that would either save her life or destroy it completely. 2 weeks later, Kendra stood in the marble foyer of Elliot's penthouse, clutching a single suitcase and feeling like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. The space was breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, contemporary art that probably cost more than her annual income, and a silence so profound it felt almost sacred. "Your room is down this hall," Elliot said, his voice echoing in the vast space. He'd maintained the same professional distance since the contract signing, treating her more like a business associate than his soon-to-be wife. "I had it decorated neutrally, but you can change anything you'd like." The guest bedroom was larger than her entire apartment, with its own bathroom and a walk-in closet that could house a small family. Everything was pristine, expensive, and utterly impersonal, like a luxury hotel suite designed for someone with no particular preferences or personality. "It's beautiful," she said, though the words felt hollow. Beautiful wasn't the same as welcoming. "There's a study adjacent to your room where you can compose, if you'd like. The piano is a Steinway. I had it tuned last week." Elliot hesitated at the doorway, as if crossing the threshold into her space would violate some unspoken rule. "Dinner is usually at 7, but I often work late. Don't feel obligated to wait for me. What about getting to know each other?" Kendra set her suitcase on the impossibly soft bed. "If we're supposed to convince people we're in love, shouldn't we at least know each other's favorite colors?" "Blue," Elliot said immediately. "Yours is green. Sage green, specifically. You wear it often and it brings out the gold flecks in your eyes." Kendra stared at him, surprised by the observation. "How did you—" "I pay attention to details. It's what makes good business sense." But his cheeks colored slightly, as if he'd revealed more than he intended. "I've prepared some basic information about my background, my business associates, family members you might meet. You should review it before our first public appearance." "Which is?" "The Winterford Foundation Charity Gala. This Saturday. It's where I'll announce our engagement." The reality of what she'd agreed to hit her like a physical blow. In 5 days, she'd be standing in a room full of Manhattan's elite, pretending to be head over heels in love with a man who spoke to her like a polite stranger. "Elliot," she said as he turned to leave, "are you having second thoughts? Because if you are, now would be the time to—" "No." His response was immediate and firm. "Are you?" Kendra thought about the shop, about the contractors who'd started renovations that morning, about the relief in Luna's eyes when she'd explained that everything was going to be okay. "No, I'm just nervous." "That's understandable. This is a significant change for both of us." After he left, Kendra unpacked her few belongings into the cavernous closet, each item looking lost in the expanse of empty space. She'd brought her mother's jewelry, her father's watch, and a few photographs, small talismans of who she was before she became Elliot Bailey's temporary wife. The study he'd mentioned was through a connecting door, and when she opened it, she gasped. The room was clearly designed for a musician, perfect acoustics, soundproofing, and in the center a gorgeous black Steinway grand piano that gleamed like obsidian in the afternoon light. She sat at the bench and let her fingers find the keys, playing a soft melody that had been haunting her dreams for weeks. The sound was incredible, rich, warm, with a resonance that seemed to fill not just the room, but her entire soul. "Do you play often?" She jumped, not having heard Elliot enter. He stood in the doorway, still maintaining his careful distance, but his expression had softened. "Every day when I can. Music is—" She searched for the right words. "It's how I make sense of the world. May I?" He gestured toward the piano. She slid over on the bench, and he sat beside her, his hands finding the keys with practiced ease. He played a classical piece she recognized, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, but his interpretation was surprisingly emotional, full of longing and barely controlled pain. "You're very good," she said when he finished. "Why did you stop?" "My father said it was a waste of time, that I should focus on things that would make money instead of things that made me happy." Elliot's hands remained on the keys, but he wasn't playing anymore. He wasn't wrong. The piano never paid a single bill, but it fed your soul. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment the careful mask slipped. "I'm not sure I have a soul left to feed." The vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. Without thinking, she placed her hand over his on the keys. "Everyone has a soul, Elliot. Sometimes it just gets buried under expectations and responsibilities." They sat in silence, her hand covering his, the afternoon light shifting across the piano's surface. It was the first moment of genuine connection they'd shared, and it felt both terrifying and inevitable. "We should probably practice," Elliot said finally, though he didn't pull his hand away. "Practice what?" "Being in love, physical affection. The way couples touch without thinking about it." He turned his hand palm up, threading their fingers together. "Like this." The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system. His hand was warm, slightly calloused from his piano-playing years, and somehow familiar despite the fact that they'd barely touched before this moment. "Is this part of the contract?" she asked, her voice slightly breathless. "It's part of survival. If we can't convince people that we're comfortable with each other, that we have genuine affection, they'll see right through us. And if we get too comfortable, if the lines start to blur—" Elliot's thumb traced across her knuckles, sending another shiver down her spine. "Then we'll deal with that when it happens. For now we focus on the goal, making this look real." But as they sat there, hands intertwined in the golden afternoon light, Kendra couldn't shake the feeling that some things couldn't be faked, and that the most dangerous part of this arrangement might not be getting caught in the lie, but getting lost in the truth. Saturday morning arrived with the weight of impending performance anxiety. Kendra stood before the floor-length mirror in her bedroom, staring at the emerald green gown that had been delivered the night before. The dress was stunning, silk that flowed like water, with delicate beading that caught the light with every movement. But it felt like a costume for a role she wasn't sure she could play. "The stylist will be here in an hour," Elliot called through her door. "Hair and makeup. I know it seems excessive, but photographs from tonight will likely end up in society pages." She opened the door to find him already dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine. The transformation was striking. Gone was the quietly intense businessman, replaced by someone who belonged in penthouses and charity galas. "You look—" she began, then stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence without crossing into territory that felt too real. "Uncomfortable," he supplied with a wry smile. "I feel like I'm wearing a uniform for a job I never wanted. But you're good at it. This world, I mean. You were born into it." Elliot's expression darkened slightly. "Being born into something doesn't mean you're good at it. Sometimes it just means you're trapped by it." Before she could respond, the doorbell announced the arrival of what Elliot called the team, a hairstylist, makeup artist, and someone whose job seemed to be ensuring that every detail of their appearance was perfect. Kendra submitted to their ministrations with the same resignation she might have felt preparing for surgery. 3 hours later, she barely recognized herself. Her natural curls had been tamed into an elegant updo. Her makeup was flawless but subtle, and the dress fit her like it had been created specifically for her body. She looked sophisticated, polished, and utterly unlike the woman who spent her days tuning guitars and helping customers find the perfect saxophone. "You're beautiful," Elliot said when she emerged, and something in his voice made her look at him sharply. The compliment sounded surprised, as if he hadn't expected to mean it. "Thank you." She smoothed her hands over the silk, nervous energy making her fidget. "Now what? Do we practice our love story? Rehearse how we met?" "We met at the shop," Elliot said, moving to pour himself a glass of whiskey from the bar cart. "You were helping a customer choose a violin for his daughter. I was there looking for a vintage guitar for my collection, a hobby I've recently developed since meeting you, of course." "Of course." Kendra accepted the glass of wine he offered her. "And we fell in love because you saw past the money to the man underneath, because I'd never met anyone who was so genuinely passionate about something that didn't involve profit margins." He paused, studying her face. "Because when you play piano, you look like you're having a conversation with something divine." The intensity in his voice made her stomach flutter. "You've been watching me play? The study shares a wall with my office. Sound carries." Elliot's cheeks colored slightly. "I hope you don't mind. It's soothing." They stood in the elegant living room, dressed like the perfect power couple, discussing their fictional love story, while something very real and very dangerous hummed in the air between them. Kendra wondered if this was how actors felt when they got too deep into character, when the lines between performance and reality began to blur. "We should practice," she said, setting down her wineglass. "Physical affection, I mean. If we're announcing our engagement tonight, people will expect us to look comfortable together." Elliot nodded, approaching her with the same careful attention he might give a skittish horse. "May I?" She nodded, and he placed his hands on her waist, drawing her closer until they were standing in what could charitably be called an intimate embrace. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine, and see the faint scar above his left eyebrow that she'd never noticed before. "Relax," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "You're holding yourself like you're about to bolt." "Maybe because I am." "Hey." His hands tightened slightly on her waist, steadying rather than restraining. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his, expecting to see the cool calculation she'd grown accustomed to. Instead, she found something softer, more uncertain. "We're going to be fine," he said. "You're stronger than you think, and smarter than most of the people we'll meet tonight. Just be yourself. Myself isn't sophisticated enough for your world. My world is full of people who mistake money for character and volume for intelligence. Your authenticity will be refreshing." He lifted one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone in a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. "The key to selling a lie is to bury it in as much truth as possible." "And what's the truth here?" Elliot's eyes searched her face, and for a moment she thought he might say something that would change everything between them. Instead, he stepped back, breaking the spell. "The truth is that you're extraordinary, Kendra Voss, and any man would be lucky to love you." The limousine arrived at 7 sharp, and as they settled into the leather seats for the ride to the gala, Kendra caught Elliot watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Second thoughts?" she asked. "No," he said quietly, "but I'm beginning to think this might be more complicated than either of us anticipated." As Manhattan glittered past the windows, Kendra wondered if he was talking about the business arrangement or about the way her heart had raced when he touched her face. Either way, she suspected he was right. They were about to discover just how dangerous it could be to play with fire, even when you thought you were only pretending to get burned. The Winterford Foundation Gala was everything Kendra had imagined, and nothing she was prepared for. The Plaza Ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the soft murmur of conversations worth millions of dollars. Women draped in designer gowns and diamonds moved like elegant predators through crowds of men who commanded boardrooms and political landscapes with equal ease. "Breathe," Elliot murmured against her ear as they paused at the entrance, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back. "You belong here." But Kendra felt like an imposter in silk and borrowed confidence. Every eye seemed to assess her, measuring her worth against Elliot's known preferences and finding her wanting. She caught fragments of whispered conversations. Who is she? Never seen her before? Rather surprising choice for Elliot Bailey. Elliot! A silver-haired woman in burgundy approached them with the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. How wonderful to see you. And this must be the mysterious woman we've all been wondering about. Margaret Thornfield, I'd like you to meet Kendra Voss. Elliot's voice carried the perfect note of warm pride. Kendra, Margaret sits on the board of the Winterford Foundation. Ms. Voss. Margaret's handshake was firm and assessing. I understand you're in the music business. I own a small shop in the village, Kendra said, lifting her chin slightly. We specialize in vintage instruments and music education. How quaint. Margaret's tone suggested she might as well have said, how unfortunate. And how did you two meet? Before Kendra could answer, Elliot's arm tightened around her waist. She was helping a customer when I walked in looking for a particular guitar. I ended up staying for 3 hours, completely captivated. His smile was perfect. Warm, slightly besotted, utterly convincing. I bought the guitar, but what I really wanted was her phone number. And did you get it? Margaret asked with the kind of laugh that society women used when they were being politely cruel. Eventually, Kendra found her voice, settling into the role. He had to come back 4 times before I agreed to coffee. I thought he was just another wealthy collector looking for a trophy piece. Weren't you? Margaret's eyebrow arched with amusement. Elliot's laugh was genuine, surprising them all. Absolutely. But Kendra taught me the difference between owning something beautiful and appreciating it. For a moment, the performance felt so real that Kendra almost forgot they were acting. The way Elliot looked at her, the warmth in his voice, it was dangerously convincing even to her. They moved through the evening like dancers following choreography they'd never practiced, but somehow knew by heart. Elliot introduced her to business associates, philanthropists, and socialites, with the easy pride of a man genuinely smitten. Kendra found herself relaxing into the role, discovering that her natural warmth and curiosity made conversations flow more easily than she'd expected. You're a natural, Elliot said during a quiet moment as they stood near the orchestra. Half these people are convinced you're slumming it by being with me. Are you joking? Look around. I'm completely out of my league here. No, you're not. You're real in a room full of people performing versions of themselves. That's incredibly powerful. The orchestra began playing a waltz, and couples drifted toward the dance floor. Elliot extended his hand with a slight bow that was both formal and playful. Shall we? I should probably mention that I learned to dance from YouTube videos, Kendra whispered as he led her onto the floor. Just follow my lead and try not to step on my feet. But dancing with Elliot was like everything else about the evening, surprisingly natural. He was a strong lead, guiding her through the steps with patient confidence, and she found herself actually enjoying the sensation of moving together to the music. You lied about the YouTube videos, he said, spinning her gracefully under his arm. Maybe a little. Luna and I took lessons when we were teenagers. We thought it would make us more sophisticated. Did it work? Luna married her dance instructor, so I'd say yes for her. Elliot's laugh was warm and genuine, and for a moment they were just 2 people enjoying each other's company, not playing roles in an elaborate deception. That's when she saw him watching them from across the room. The man was tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of classical good looks that belonged on magazine covers. But it wasn't his appearance that made Kendra's breath catch. It was the way he was looking at her. Interested, predatory, entirely too confident. Who's that? She asked, nodding discreetly in his direction. Elliot followed her gaze, and she felt his entire body tense. Harrison Caldwell, real estate empire, political connections, and a reputation for getting whatever he wants. He's looking at me like I'm what he wants. He is. Elliot's voice was tight, controlled. Harrison has a thing for other men's wives. He considers it a sport. The music swelled toward its crescendo, and Harrison began moving in their direction with the lazy confidence of a shark scenting blood in the water. Kendra felt Elliot's grip on her waist tighten possessively. "What do we do?" she whispered. Elliot's eyes were dark when they met hers, something dangerous flickering in their depths. "We give him a show he won't forget." Before she could ask what he meant, the music ended, and Harrison Caldwell was there, his smile sharp and calculating. "Elliot, old friend, aren't you going to introduce me to your beautiful partner?" And in that moment, Kendra realized that their first real test as a couple wasn't going to be about convincing people they were in love. It was going to be about what happened when someone threatened to take that love away. "Harrison Caldwell," the man said, extending his hand to Kendra with the kind of smile that had probably charmed countless women into forgetting their better judgment. "And you must be the woman who's finally tamed our Elliot." Kendra felt Elliot's tension radiate through his touch, as Harrison's fingers lingered just a moment too long over hers. There was something predatory in the man's pale green eyes, a calculation that made her skin crawl despite his polished charm. "Kendra Voss," she replied, extracting her hand with deliberate grace, "though I'm not sure anyone could tame Elliot. That would require him to be wild to begin with." Harrison's laugh was warm and practiced. "Oh, I think you'd be surprised what lurks beneath that controlled exterior. Elliot and I have known each other since prep school, haven't we, old friend? He used to be quite the rebel before he learned to channel all that passion into profit margins." "People change," Elliot said, his voice carrying a warning that Harrison either didn't catch or chose to ignore. "Do they?" Harrison's gaze shifted between them with obvious amusement. "I find that passion has a way of finding new outlets. Take music, for instance. Elliot tells me you're quite accomplished, Kendra. I'd love to hear you play sometime. I have a beautiful Bösendorfer at my estate in the Hamptons." "How generous," Kendra replied smoothly, though something about his invitation felt more like a trap than an offer. "But I'm afraid my schedule is quite full these days." "Surely Elliot doesn't monopolize all your time. A woman with your talents deserves broader appreciation." The comment hung in the air like a challenge, and Kendra felt Elliot's entire body go rigid beside her. She recognized the moment for what it was. Harrison was testing them, probing for weakness, looking for any sign that their relationship was as fragile as he suspected. "Elliot appreciates all of my talents," Kendra said, sliding her arm around Elliot's waist and looking up at him with what she hoped was convincing adoration. "Don't you, darling?" "Every single one," Elliot replied, his voice rough with an emotion that sounded dangerously real. His arm tightened around her, pulling her closer against his side in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. Harrison's smile sharpened. "How romantic. Young love is so intense. I remember feeling that way about my first wife, and my second." His laugh was casual, but his eyes remained calculating. "Of course, passion like that burns bright and fast. The trick is finding someone who can sustain your interest long-term." "The trick," Elliot said, his voice cutting like ice, "is finding someone worth sustaining interest in. I imagine that's been challenging for you, Harrison." The barb hit its mark. For just a moment, Harrison's polished mask slipped, revealing something cold and vindictive underneath. Then the smile returned, broader than before. "Touché. But then, I've always preferred the thrill of the chase to the comfort of the catch." His gaze moved deliberately to Kendra. "There's something exhilarating about pursuing something that belongs to someone else, don't you think?" The threat was unmistakable now, wrapped in silk, but sharp as a blade. Kendra felt her temper flare, not at the insult to her, but at the casual way he was trying to reduce her to a prize to be won or lost between two men. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey, "but I think you're confused about something fundamental. I don't belong to anyone, Mr. Caldwell. I choose to be with Elliot because he's the kind of man who understands that a partnership between equals is far more valuable than ownership of a possession." Elliot's sharp intake of breath told her she'd surprised him, but she kept her eyes on Harrison, watching as his confident expression flickered with uncertainty. "How modern of you," Harrison said finally, "but surely you understand that some men prefer a more traditional dynamic. Some women find it quite freeing to let a strong man make the difficult decisions." "And some women," Kendra replied, stepping closer to Harrison with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Find it insulting when men assume they need to be rescued from their own choices. I chose Elliot, Mr. Caldwell. Not because he pursued me, but because when I met him, I saw a man worth choosing. The words came out with such conviction that for a moment, Kendra almost believed them herself. She felt Elliot's hand on her back, warm and steady, grounding her in the role she was playing. "Well," Harrison said, his composure fully restored, but his eyes sharp with interest. "You're certainly spirited. I can see why Elliot is so captivated." He turned to Elliot with a smile that held too many teeth. "You better keep a close eye on this one, my friend. A woman with that much fire attracts attention." "I'm not worried," Elliot replied, and something in his tone made Kendra look up at him sharply. Kendra knows exactly what she wants, and she knows the difference between a man and a predator. The insult landed like a slap. Harrison's face went cold, his mask finally slipping completely. "Careful, Elliot," he said softly. "You're starting to sound possessive, almost desperate. It's not a good look on you. Neither is jealousy on you, Harrison. But then, you've never handled rejection well." The two men stared at each other across what felt like a battlefield, years of history and rivalry crackling between them like electricity. Kendra suddenly understood that this wasn't just about her. This was about power, about proving dominance, about settling old scores that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with conquest. "Gentlemen," she said firmly, placing herself between them with the kind of authority that came from years of managing difficult customers. "I think we've all made our positions clear. Harrison, it was enlightening to meet you. Elliot, I believe they're serving dinner soon." Harrison stepped back with a laugh that sounded genuine despite the venom in his eyes. "Of course. Forgive me. I got carried away by charming company." He bowed slightly to Kendra. "Until we meet again, Mrs. Voss." "And we will meet again." As he melted back into the crowd, Kendra felt Elliot's hand tremble slightly against her back. When she looked up at him, his jaw was clenched, his eyes dark with an emotion she couldn't quite identify. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "Fine," he said, but his voice was tight. "Just thank you for what you said. You didn't have to defend me like that. We're supposed to be partners, remember? Partners defend each other." Elliot looked down at her, something shifting in his expression. "Is that what we are? Partners?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to examine. Before Kendra could answer, the dinner bell chimed and the moment dissolved into movement and social obligation. But as they made their way to their table, Kendra couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed between them, and that Harrison Caldwell had just lit a fuse that would eventually explode their carefully constructed arrangement. The ride home from the gala was heavy with unspoken tension. Elliot sat rigid in the corner of the limousine, his bow tie loosened and his eyes fixed on the city lights streaming past the window. Kendra studied his profile, noting the tight line of his jaw and the way his hands clenched and unclenched in his lap. "You want to talk about what happened back there?" she asked finally. "Nothing happened. Harrison being Harrison. Manipulative, predatory, testing boundaries." Elliot's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the anger simmering underneath. "I should have warned you about him. You did warn me. You said he had a reputation for pursuing other men's wives. I didn't tell you that he destroyed my engagement 5 years ago." The admission hung in the air between them like a confession. Kendra turned to face him fully, seeing something raw and vulnerable in his expression that he'd never let her glimpse before. "Elliot, her name was Victoria." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Beautiful, sophisticated, from exactly the right family. My father handpicked her, actually. Said she'd be perfect for the image I needed to project." "Did you love her?" Elliot was quiet for so long that Kendra thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I thought I did. Or maybe I loved the idea of her, the way she fit so perfectly into the life everyone expected me to live." What happened? Harrison decided he wanted her. He was persistent, charming. He made her feel like she was missing out on something by being with me. Made her question whether what we had was real or just convenient. Elliot's hands tightened into fists. Turns out it was just convenient, for both of us. Kendra felt a stab of something that might have been jealousy, which was ridiculous given their arrangement. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Harrison did me a favor, actually. Showed me that relationships built on expectations rather than genuine feeling are fragile, disposable." He turned to look at her then, his eyes intense. "That's why tonight, what you said to him." "I meant it," Kendra said quietly. "All of it. You are worth choosing, Elliot. Any woman who couldn't see that was an idiot." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, gratitude, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. "You realize you just defended a marriage that doesn't actually exist to protect feelings I'm not supposed to have?" The words hit her like a physical blow. Because he was right. Somewhere in the middle of their performance, she'd stopped acting and started feeling. The protective fury she'd felt when Harrison threatened Elliot, the pride in her voice when she'd claimed him. None of that had been fake. "Elliot, I know." He reached across the space between them, his fingers finding hers in the darkness. "I know, and it scares the hell out of me too." They sat in silence for the rest of the ride, hands linked, both pretending that the electricity between them was just static from the leather seats. Back at the penthouse, they stood in the marble foyer like strangers again, the intimacy of the car ride dissipating in the vast space. Elliot loosened his bow tie completely, the formal facade cracking to reveal exhaustion underneath. "I should let you get some rest," he said, already moving toward his wing of the apartment. "Thank you for tonight. You were perfect." "Elliot, wait." He stopped, his hand on the banister, but didn't turn around. "That night with Victoria," Kendra said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "When Harrison took her away, did you fight for her?" "No." The word was quiet, defeated. "I let her go. Told myself it was the dignified thing to do, that if she wanted him more than me, I should step aside gracefully." "Do you regret it?" This time he did turn, his eyes meeting hers across the foyer. "Every day for 5 years. The confession hung between them, raw and honest, and terrifying in its implications. Kendra took a step toward him, then another, drawn by something she couldn't name, and wasn't sure she wanted to resist. "What if?" she began, then stopped, losing her nerve. "What if what? What if next time you didn't let go?" Elliot's breath caught, his eyes searching her face as if trying to determine whether she meant what he thought she meant. "Kendra, I know we have rules, boundaries, a contract that spells out exactly what this is and isn't supposed to be." She moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes. "But what happened tonight, the way you looked at Harrison when he threatened me, the way I felt when I defended you, that wasn't in the contract." "No," Elliot said slowly, "it wasn't. So, what do we do about it?" Elliot reached up, his fingers tracing the line of her cheek the way he had earlier, but this time there was no pretense of practice or performance. This time it was just them, in the quiet of their shared space, facing something that could destroy their carefully constructed arrangement or transform it into something real. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've spent 5 years building walls to make sure I never feel that vulnerable again, that helpless." "Maybe the point isn't avoiding vulnerability," Kendra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's finding someone worth being vulnerable with." Elliot's thumb traced across her lower lip, and she felt her breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, really kiss her, not for show or practice, but because he wanted to, because he couldn't help himself. Instead, he stepped back, his hand falling to his side. "Good night, Kendra," he said, his voice rough with restraint. "Good night," she whispered back, watching him disappear up the stairs and wondering if they'd just crossed a line they could never uncross, or if they'd simply acknowledged a line that had never really existed at all. That night, Kendra lay in her expensive bed in her borrowed life, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the man sleeping down the hall. A man who was supposed to be her husband in name only, but who was becoming something much more dangerous, someone she was starting to love. and she had no idea what she was going to do about it. The weeks following the gala passed in a strange dance of proximity and distance. Elliot threw himself into work with renewed intensity, leaving early and returning late, as if staying busy could somehow erase the moment of vulnerability they'd shared in the foyer. When they did interact, he was polite, careful, maintaining exactly the right amount of warmth for the benefit of his housekeeper and the various business associates who occasionally visited. But Kendra felt the tension in every shared meal, every accidental brush of fingers when he handed her coffee, every moment his eyes lingered on her before he caught himself and looked away. "You're both being idiots," Luna announced one afternoon as she helped Kendra reorganize the sheet music section at Voss & Sons. The renovations were nearly complete, and the shop gleamed with fresh paint and restored vintage fixtures. "The man is clearly crazy about you." "It's complicated," Kendra said, not for the first time. "No, it's not. He likes you, you like him. Everything else is just noise." Luna pulled a dusty collection of Chopin etudes from the shelf with more force than necessary. "When's the last time you saw him smile? Really smile? Not that polite thing he does for the cameras." Kendra thought about it, realizing with a pang that she couldn't remember. The Elliot who had laughed at her nervous jokes during their first dance, who had shared his pain about Victoria, that man had disappeared behind a wall of professional courtesy. "Maybe it's better this way," she said, though the words tasted like ash. "Clean boundaries, no complications." "Honey, the complications already exist. You're just pretending they don't." That evening, Kendra returned to the penthouse to find Elliot in the study, sitting at the piano, but not playing. His hands rested on the keys as if he'd forgotten what to do with them, his shoulders tight with exhaustion. "Rough day?" she asked from the doorway. He startled slightly, then offered her that careful smile she'd grown to hate. "The merger is moving into final stages. Lots of details to iron out." "That's good news, isn't it, what you've been working toward?" "Yes," but something in his voice suggested it didn't feel like good news. 6 more months, maybe less, and everything will be finalized. 6 months. The thought hit her like cold water. In 6 months, Elliot would have his deal, she would have her shop secure and debt-free, and their arrangement would shift into its final phase before the inevitable dissolution. "What happens then?" she asked, moving into the room despite every instinct telling her to maintain distance. "Then we figure out how to transition, gradually spend less time together publicly, start building the narrative that we're growing apart, make the eventual divorce seem natural rather than sudden." He spoke about their future separation with the same clinical detachment he might use to discuss quarterly projections, but Kendra caught the slight tremor in his voice that suggested it wasn't as easy for him as he pretended. "Elliot," she moved closer, drawn by impulses she couldn't quite control. "What if we didn't want to transition?" His hand stilled completely on the keys. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if when the 6 months are up we don't want this to end?" Elliot stood abruptly, putting distance between them with the efficiency of someone who'd practiced the movement. "Kendra, we can't think like that. This has always been temporary. We both knew that going in. People change their minds about temporary arrangements all the time. They fall in love, they get married for real, they—" "No!" The word came out sharp enough to cut. "We can't fall in love." "I can't fall in love." "Why not?" Elliot turned to face her, and the anguish in his eyes made her chest ache. "Because I don't know how to do it right. Because every time I've tried to care about someone, I've either lost them or driven them away. Because love makes you weak, and weakness is a luxury I can't afford." "That's not true, isn't it?" Elliot laughed bitterly. "Look what happened with Victoria. I thought I loved her, thought we had something real, and the moment someone else showed interest, she was gone. What does that say about my judgment? About my ability to inspire genuine feeling?" Kendra felt her heart break for him, for the man who'd been taught that love was a liability, that vulnerability was failure, that caring too much was the same as caring wrong. "Elliot, what Harrison did to you and Victoria, that wasn't about your worth. That was about his need to win and her inability to see what she was giving up." You don't understand. Elliot's voice was raw now, stripped of its usual control. My father spent my entire childhood drilling into me that emotions are weakness, that personal attachments make you manipulable. When Victoria left, it proved him right. Your father was wrong. Was he? Look at us, Kendra. Look at what's happening right now. We agreed to a simple business arrangement, and now we're standing here talking about love, like it's a viable option. Like we could just decide to rewrite the rules because it feels good. Maybe we could. Elliot stared at her, something desperate and hungry flickering in his eyes before he locked it down. And what happens when you realize that I don't know how to be what you need? When the novelty wears off and you see that I'm exactly what my father made me, a man who's better at acquiring things than loving them, then I guess we'd figure it out together. Kendra took another step toward him, close enough now to see the conflict warring in his expression. That's what people do when they care about each other, Elliot. They figure it out. For a moment, she thought he might surrender. His eyes softened, his carefully controlled expression cracking to reveal something raw and wanting underneath. He lifted his hand as if to touch her face, then caught himself. "We have an event next week," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral again. "The New Year's Eve charity ball. It's important. Several of my potential partners will be there." The abrupt subject change felt like a door slamming shut, but Kendra recognized it for what it was. Elliot retreating to safer ground, rebuilding his walls before they could crumble completely. "Of course," she said quietly. "I'll be ready." "Good. The stylist will come by Thursday to help you choose something appropriate." He moved toward the door, then paused without turning around. "Kendra? Yes? What you said earlier, about figuring things out together. That's not how my world works. In my world, you figure things out alone, or you don't survive." "Maybe," she said to his retreating form, "it's time you learned to live in a different world." But he was already gone, leaving her alone with the piano and the weight of everything they'd almost said, almost done, almost become. New Year's Eve was 6 days away. 6 days to decide whether they would keep pretending this was just business, or whether they'd find the courage to admit that somewhere between the first handshake and tonight, they'd stopped acting and started falling. Kendra just wasn't sure which option scared her more. The New Year's Eve charity ball at the Metropolitan Museum was a glittering spectacle that made the Winterford Gala look intimate by comparison. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across marble floors, while Manhattan's elite celebrated another year of accumulated wealth and influence. Kendra moved through the crowd in a midnight blue gown that seemed to capture starlight, but her attention was focused entirely on the man beside her. Elliot had been different all evening, distracted, tense, checking his phone with unusual frequency. The carefully controlled businessman she'd grown accustomed to had been replaced by someone who seemed to be fighting an internal war with every breath. "Everything all right?" she asked during a quiet moment near the champagne fountain. "Fine." His smile was automatic, practiced. Just watching the time, midnight approaches. There was something in his tone that made her study his face more carefully. "Elliot, what aren't you telling me?" Before he could answer, a familiar voice cut through the ambient chatter like a blade. Well, the happy couple. Harrison Caldwell materialized beside them with his predatory smile firmly in place. But tonight there was something different about him, a confidence that bordered on smugness. He was dressed impeccably as always, but Kendra noticed the way his eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "Harrison," Elliot said coolly, "I'm surprised to see you here. I thought you were spending the holidays in Aspen." "Change of plans. I found something much more interesting to occupy my time right here in the city." His gaze moved deliberately to Kendra, lingering with obvious appreciation. "You look absolutely radiant tonight, Mrs. Bailey. That color is stunning on you." "Thank you," Kendra replied carefully, noting Elliot's immediate tension at Harrison's use of her married name. "I don't suppose you'd honor me with a dance." Harrison extended his hand with theatrical gallantry. "Just one for old time's sake. Elliot won't mind, will you, old friend?" It was a challenge disguised as politeness, and they all knew it. Elliot's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Kendra stepped forward with a smile that could have frozen champagne. "How thoughtful of you to ask, Harrison, but I'm afraid I'm feeling a bit tired. Perhaps you could find another partner." Harrison's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Of course, though I must say, Elliot, you're awfully possessive for a man in such a secure relationship." "Meaning?" Elliot's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Meaning that confident husbands don't usually mind their wives dancing with old friends, unless, of course, they have reason to worry about the strength of their marriage." Harrison's smile sharpened. "Or the authenticity of it." The words hit like a physical blow. Kendra felt the blood drain from her face as the implication sank in. Somehow, Harrison knew, or suspected, or was fishing with the precision of someone who'd caught the scent of deception. "I think you've had too much champagne, Harrison," Elliot said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "Have I? Or have I simply been paying attention?" Harrison moved closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Did you really think no one would investigate the sudden appearance of Elliot Bailey's mysterious bride? A woman with no social connections, no background in your circles, who appeared in your life conveniently just as your merger negotiations began?" Kendra's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything, my dear. I'm stating facts. Elliot needed a wife for business reasons, and you needed financial salvation for your little music shop. It's actually quite brilliant, if it weren't so transparent." The accusation hung in the air between them like a lit fuse. Around them, the party continued its glittering dance, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their small circle. "You're fishing," Elliot said, but Kendra could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Am I? Then you won't mind if I share my observations with some of your potential business partners. I'm sure they'd find the story fascinating." The threat was clear. Harrison had enough suspicion to plant doubt, and in Elliot's world, doubt was as dangerous as proof. The merger that Elliot had worked years to achieve could crumble based on whispers and speculation. "What do you want?" Elliot asked quietly. Harrison's smile was triumphant. "Nothing dramatic, just a dance with your lovely wife. Right here, right now, where everyone can see how comfortable she is in another man's arms." It was a trap. If Kendra refused, it would only add credence to Harrison's suspicions. If she agreed, Harrison would undoubtedly use the opportunity to plant more seeds of doubt, to probe for weaknesses in their performance. "Fine," Kendra said, surprising them both. "One dance." "Kendra," Elliot started, but she silenced him with a look. "It's all right," she said, though her heart was racing. "What's one dance?" As Harrison led her to the dance floor, Kendra felt Elliot's eyes on them like a physical weight. The orchestra was playing a waltz, something slow and intimate that would give Harrison plenty of time to work his psychological warfare. "You're quite good at this," Harrison murmured as they began to move. "The devoted wife act. You almost had me convinced." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please, I've been watching you both for weeks. The careful distance, the practiced smiles, the way you both think too hard before touching each other. Real couples don't choreograph their affection." Kendra forced herself to maintain eye contact, even as panic clawed at her chest. "You're imagining things." "Am I? Tell me, Kendra, when did you fall in love with him?" The question caught her off guard, and she felt her carefully constructed facade waver. That's hardly your business." "You hesitated. Interesting." Harrison spun her gracefully, his smile sharp with satisfaction. "You see, real wives don't have to think about when they fell in love. They just know." Around them, the party swirled in a kaleidoscope of color and sound, but Kendra felt as if she were drowning. Every second of this dance was giving Harrison more ammunition, more evidence to support his suspicions. That's when she saw Elliot cutting through the crowd toward them, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. But it wasn't directed at Harrison. It was something deeper, more primal, something that looked suspiciously like jealousy. The clock on the museum wall showed 11:58, 2 minutes until midnight, 2 minutes until the moment when tradition demanded that couples kiss, when the illusion of their love would be tested in front of hundreds of witnesses. "Here comes your husband," Harrison whispered against her ear. "I wonder what he'll do when the clock strikes 12. Kiss you like a man in love, or hesitate just long enough to confirm everything I suspect." Elliot reached them just as the orchestra finished the waltz, his eyes dark with something that made Kendra's breath catch. He didn't ask permission, didn't offer polite excuses. He simply took her hand and pulled her away from Harrison with the possessive certainty of a man reclaiming what belonged to him. "The countdown is starting," Elliot said, his voice rough with emotion. Around them, voices began to rise in anticipation. 10, 9, 8. Kendra looked up at Elliot, seeing something in his eyes she'd never seen before, something raw and desperate and entirely real. 7, 6, 5. "Elliot," she whispered, but he silenced her by cupping her face in his hands. 4, 3, 2. "Forgive me," he breathed against her lips. 1, "Happy New Year." And then he kissed her. Not the careful, practiced kiss of their arrangement, not the polite performance they'd rehearsed for public consumption. This was desperate, hungry, born of weeks of suppressed longing and the sudden, terrifying realization that he couldn't bear to lose her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kendra saw the truth written across Elliot's face as clearly as if he'd spoken it aloud. He loved her, truly, desperately, irrevocably loved her. And Harrison Caldwell, watching from across the dance floor with murder in his eyes, knew it too. The week following New Year's Eve passed in a haze of stolen glances and careful conversations. Elliot had retreated behind his walls again, but something fundamental had shifted. The kiss had broken something open between them that couldn't be sealed back up, no matter how hard he tried to pretend otherwise. Kendra found him in his office on a grey January morning, staring out at the city with the weight of the world on his shoulders. The merger documents were scattered across his desk, but his attention was clearly elsewhere. "The lawyers called," he said without turning around. "Harrison's been making inquiries, asking questions about our marriage, our timeline, our financial arrangements." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that could destroy everything we've worked for." Elliot finally faced her, and she saw exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "He knows, Kendra. Maybe not the specifics, but he knows enough to plant doubt where it matters most." "So what do we do?" Elliot laughed bitterly. "We do what I should have done from the beginning. We end this before it destroys both our lives." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I release you from our agreement. You keep the shop free and clear. I'll make sure of that regardless of what happens to the merger. But we end this charade before Harrison can use it to hurt you." "And you? What happens to your deal?" "I'll figure something out, or I won't. Either way, it's not your responsibility anymore." Elliot moved to his desk, pulling out legal documents with efficient, mechanical movements. "I've already had the papers drawn up. Sign these, and you're free." Kendra stared at the divorce papers, understanding flooding through her with devastating clarity. "You're running away. I'm protecting you. You're doing exactly what you did with Victoria. You're letting fear make your decisions for you." She pushed the papers away. "I won't sign these." Elliot's composure cracked. "Kendra, you don't understand what you're risking. Harrison will come after you, try to use you to get to me. He'll dig into your life, your past, looking for ammunition. I won't let you become collateral damage in my war with him. What if I don't want to be protected? What if I want to fight beside you instead of being shipped off to safety like some helpless damsel? Because I can't bear to lose you." The admission exploded out of him with raw desperation. "Because somewhere between that first handshake and last week's kiss, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you, and the thought of Harrison using that against you makes me want to burn the world down." The silence that followed was deafening. Elliot stood frozen as if he couldn't believe he'd finally spoken the truth aloud. "Say it again," Kendra whispered. "What?" "Say that you love me, not because you're afraid or angry or trying to protect me, just because it's true." Elliot crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with trembling fingers. "I love you, Kendra Voss. I love your strength, your passion, the way you see music in everything. I love that you chose to defend me when you had every reason to stay neutral. I love that you make me want to be brave enough to deserve you. Elliot, I love you, and I'm terrified that loving you makes you a target. That my father was right, and caring about someone gives your enemies a weapon to use against you." Kendra placed her hands over his, steadying them both. "Your father was wrong about everything that mattered. Love isn't a weakness, Elliot. It's the only thing strong enough to defeat people like Harrison." "How can you be so sure?" "Because love makes us fight harder, not surrender faster. Because when someone threatens what we love, we don't run. We stand our ground and protect it." Before Elliot could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. His face went pale as he read it. "What is it?" "Harrison. He's called a meeting with the merger partners for tomorrow. He's going to present his concerns about our marriage." Kendra felt ice settle in her stomach, but alongside the fear came something else, fierce determination. "Then we tell them the truth. Kendra, if we admit this started as a business arrangement, no, we tell them the real truth." She moved closer, her voice gaining strength with each word. "We tell them that yes, this marriage began as a practical solution to a business problem. But we also tell them what happened next, that 2 people who thought they were just playing roles discovered they'd found something real." Elliot stared at her. "That's incredibly risky." "Yes, it is, but it's also honest. And I'm betting that honesty is more powerful than Harrison's half-truths and manipulations." The next day, they sat across from 3 impeccably dressed executives in a Manhattan boardroom that could have doubled as a museum. Harrison was there too, his smile sharp with anticipated victory. "Gentlemen," Harrison began, "I feel it's my duty to bring certain concerns to your attention regarding Mr. Bailey's recent marriage." But Elliot stood before Harrison could continue. "He's right," Elliot said simply. "Our marriage did begin as a business arrangement." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Harrison's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the denial he'd expected. "But what Mr. Caldwell doesn't understand," Elliot continued, his voice growing stronger, "is that sometimes the best business decisions lead to unexpected personal discoveries. Yes, I married Kendra because I needed the stability you required in a business partner. But I stayed married to her because she taught me that there's something more valuable than any merger, the courage to love someone enough to be honest about it." Kendra stood beside him, their hands finding each other naturally. "We could have hidden the truth, continued the deception, but we chose honesty instead, because that's what real partners do. They face challenges together, with integrity." The lead executive, a silver-haired man named Andrews, studied them both carefully. "Mr. Bailey, are you saying that your marriage is now genuine?" "I'm saying that it's the most genuine thing in my life," Elliot replied, "and that any business partnership worth having should be built on the same foundation of trust and honesty that we've learned to build our marriage on." Harrison's face had gone red with fury. "This is absurd. They've admitted to deceiving you from the beginning." "No," Andrews said slowly. "They've admitted to growing beyond their original intentions." "That's not deception. That's evolution." He smiled at Kendra and Elliot. "Congratulations on your marriage, Mr. Bailey, both versions of it." 6 months later, Kendra stood in the expanded Voss and Sons, watching Elliot help a young girl choose her first violin. The merger had been approved unanimously. Harrison Caldwell had been conspicuously absent from subsequent social events. "You know," Luna said, joining her at the counter, "when you told me you were fake marrying a billionaire, this isn't how I imagined it would end." "How did you imagine it would end?" "With you coming to your senses and running for the hills." Luna grinned. "I'm glad I was wrong." Elliot looked up from the violin demonstration, catching Kendra's eye across the shop. The smile he gave her was warm, unguarded, and entirely real. The smile of a man who'd learned that the greatest risk was worth taking when you found someone worth taking it for. "So am I," Kendra said, moving toward her husband. Her real husband. The man who'd taught her that sometimes the most beautiful music came from two melodies that learned to harmonize perfectly together. And as Elliot's arms closed around her in their shop full of instruments and dreams and second chances, Kendra knew they'd found something worth more than any contract. A love that was entirely, authentically, forever theirs. The end. If you were Kendra, would you have accepted Elliot's fake marriage deal? Picture this. You're about to lose everything your parents built, and a mysterious billionaire offers to save your life in exchange for 3 years of pretending to be his wife. No intimacy, no love, just appearances. But you know you might fall for real. Would you risk your heart for a chance to save your dreams? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully every moment, every detail in the story has brought you emotions, thoughts, and maybe a little joy or motivation. Thank you for spending time with us, and hope that the next stories will continue to accompany you and touch your heart.